right, here we go. All right. So, I want to convert 4x minus y into a polar equation. It's already in a rectangular situation. I want it to be a polarly situation. Okay? So, first off, rectangularly, what is 4x minus y equals 5? What shape? Shape. Should be an easy one. It's what? It's a line. Talk to me about the line. It's linear.
What are you looking for?
Well, what do we need to know about a line? How, in terms of a line, what tells me which way it goes? Say it. The slope. Okay, so what's the slope of this line? 4? 4? Yep, okay. So this is a line. Oops. Gotta turn this on. So this is a line with a slope of 4. And what's the other part of a line that we need to know? The y-intercept. What's the int? -5, yeah, exactly. How'd you get those? So you solved it for y? Yeah. Yep, exactly. Okay, so this is y equals 4x minus 5. Okay, this is where you got all that from. Okay, all right. On a rectangular graph, okay, that means I go down 5 from the origin, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And then from that point I go up 4 and right 1. Up 4, 2 and 4 and right 1. 2 and 4 and right 1. Or I could go down 4 and left 1. Either way, that gives me a wonderful looking graph of that looks like that. Right? Okay. You've been doing that probably since you were in middle school. Right? Okay. Now, polarly, or actually tap the brakes before I go to polarly, that's going to look like 4x minus 5. It's going to look like that. Right? Okay. Which is what we just graphed. Loved it. Okay. Now, I want to come up with the polar equation that gives me that exact line. Okay? So that when I graph them, they are one on top of the other, exactamo. Okay? Right? So, what tools do we have in our toolbox that we can change 4x minus y equals 5 into a polar graph or a polar equation? Take a step back. Polar equations look like what? What do polar equations look like? We talked about that on Wednesday.
Cosine, sine.
They do not. They look like what? So they all look like, just in general. It's R equals, so there are equals ones. Okay? They might have sine and cosine in them, Paul, but not necessarily. Like we did one that had cosecant in it the other day. Okay? Right? So we can't just say they have, all of them have sine, all of them have cosine. Okay? Okay? So, what can I do? Here, 4x minus y. Tools in my toolbox. And then I got to solve it for r. Tools in in my toolbox. X might be equal to something in my toolbox. Y might be equal to something in my toolbox. So I'm going to have to get rid of those. I got to get rid of X and I got to get rid of Y. So what do I know X is equal to and what do I know Y is equal to? Just cosine and sine? So put it all together. X equals what? Of theta. So X equals R cosine of theta. What's Y then? R sine of theta. Oops, tap the brakes. Come on, fix that. Better than that. It was the wrong color. It's not totally on you. Not on me. Okay, so, any bots? What did you tell me I got to do now? Starts with an S, ends with all for R. Because all of them look like R equals, right? Okay, so how am I going to solve this for R? Using my Algebra 1 or my pre-algebra skills? Dirks, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If this were 4x squared plus x, how would you solve for x? Factor it. So if it's 4r cosine of theta minus r sine of theta, and I want to solve it for r, what would I do?
Factor it.
What am I going to factor out? R, because they both have an r in them, right? I can't factor out r sine of theta because they don't have both a sine, right? So let's factor out an r. If I factor out an r, that leaves me, oops, I put equal sign. Tap the brakes, Stephanie. R times 4 cosine of theta minus sine of theta equals, oops, I got to close that parentheses, equals 5. Yes? Is it solved for r yet? No, because I don't have r equals. So how am I going to get r equals? Divide that whole ugly parentheses thing. Okay. So r here is going to equal 5 divided by 4 cosine of theta minus sine of theta. Okay. Now, if I wanted to graph that, I could put in 0 degrees for theta, correct? If I put in 0 degrees for theta, the cosine of 0 degrees is 1. So that first part is 4. The sine of 0 degrees is 0. So this is at 0 degrees, I'm at 5 divided by 4, which is 1.25. Right? If I put in 90 degrees, or pi over 2, now my cosine is 0, and my sine is 1. So 4 times the cosine at pi over 2 is 0, minus the sine at pi over 2 is negative 1. 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. So if I'm up here at 90 degrees, I would go 5 down, so I'd really be going down to there. And that would give me a line in the polar world. Over here, in a graphical type of way, I need to change my entry and my edit into polar, and then I need to make myself a fraction. 5 divided by 4 cosine of theta minus sine of theta. And when I graph this, it should go right over the top of my rectangular one. And shabam, it does. So those two are what we call equivalent. Probably just use that one, but oh well. Okay. Let's talk about number 3 here for a second. Thinking back to our first semester conic section days. What is, or what shape is x squared plus y squared equals 9? What? Circle. Talk to me more about what kind of a circle it is. There's 2 parts of a circle that I need to know. What's at the origin? Center. Okay, so it's centered at the origin. Okay, that's one piece that I need to know where the center is. Okay, what else? What's the radius of this circle? It's 3, right? Okay, so this is a circle centered at the origin with radius of 3. Polarly, remember I've got to go right over the top of that. So polarly, I need a circle, right? Centered where? Where? Where's my center going to be polarly? Where would the center be? Same spot? So what do we call that in polar form? Because it's not the origin. Origin is rectangularly. What do we call that in polar form? What?
Pole.
It's centered at the pole.
Crazy. That's so cute. I think you trials for us to get.
It's kind of sad, but I let it slide. We got there. We ended up getting there. Okay? Okay? So, in polar form, what's the equation of a circle centered at the pole with radius of 3? Anybody know? Remember, it's got to be R equals. Say it louder, Gabby.
That was helpful.
Right? Now, let's say that all of that memory stuff, I don't have that. Okay? So that means I got to use my toolbox, right? Okay? So what tool would I use that has in my toolbox that has x squared and y squared? Don't be like my first class where they just square rooted both sides and they said, well, it's just x plus y equals 3. Okay, so from my toolbox, oops, that's a bad R. Right? So we could use that one, or we could tweak that tool a little bit, right? So r squared would equal x squared plus y squared, right? It's kind of like having a pliers and a needle nose pliers. They're both pliers, but one's just a little different than the other one. Okay? So if I have x squared plus y squared equals 9, I could say here then that this is r squared. Then I could square root both sides. Okay? But having a radius of positive 3 and having a radius of negative 3, when I go all the way around the circle, it's going to give me the exact same thing. Okay? So that's why we just say here then r is equal to 3. Okay? Or we could go back to my first class when they said, yep, we're square rooting. That's great, as long as we square root correctly. If I square root here and here, the square root of x squared plus y squared, that's going to be r. And then this would be plus or minus 3. And then we're back to that whole going one way or going the other way, going all the way around the circle gets me the same thing.
So what did they do that was
They did the square root of x squared plus y squared. Yeah, I shook my head like this. And then I told myself, if you do that on a test, I'm taking 50 points off. I don't care if the test is only worth 2 points.
Yeah.
Because I can put negative scores in the grade book. It's kind of crazy that we can. Okay? All right, so you now do number 4. Number 4. All right, so this is r squared, correct? Okay. Plus 4, what's x? Switching to polar, what's x? R cosine of theta. Right? Okay. What do I need to do? I need to get r equals, right? So that means I got to solve for r. So what do I have to do? Take out an r. Okay. So if I take out an r, I'm left with r plus 4 cosine of theta. I just saw a light bulb go on. Okay. Then what? I've still got to solve, right? So what do I got to do next? Set them both equal to 0. So r equals 0. R plus 4 cosine theta equals 0. r equals 0. What is r equals 0? In polar, what's r equals 0? R equals 3 was a circle centered at the pole with a radius of 3. So what's r equals 0? It's what? It's a circle centered where? At the pole with a radius of 0. So it's nothing. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. Okay? Okay. So then this one, if I solve this one, I get r equals -4 cosine of theta. Now, let's talk about those two. This one and its rectangular one. Rectangularly, it was x squared plus y squared plus 4x equals 0. What picture from first semester, what shape of the graph is that? What shape is it? It's a circle because it's x squared plus y squared. Where is it? It's what? So where's the center? Negative, it's the little circle. -2, 0, radius of 2, right? Okay. So when I graph that polar equation, it's got to go right over the top. It's got to be a circle centered at -2, 180 degrees with a radius of 2. And it goes right over the top. Okay. So those are the same, one and the same. Okay. So now that we've gone from rectangular into polar, let's go from polar into rectangular. Okay? So, what can you tell me about the polar graph of r equals 5? What can you tell me about it? It's a circle. Centered where? At the pole. Okay, so that would be this. Right? Okay, so rectangularly now, it's got to go right over the top of that, remember? Okay, so I need a circle centered where? With radius equal to 5. Okay, memory, don't fail me now. First semester, what is the equation of a circle centered at the origin with radius of 5? x squared plus y squared equals 25. Dirks, did your memory fail you? Okay, so we got to come up with a different way for when our memory fails us, right? Okay, so let's go back here to r equals 5. In my toolbox, what do I know is equal to r? What is r equal to in my toolbox? Do you like radicals? So how would I get rid of it then? Square both sides, right? Right? So if I square both sides here, what do I get? I get that, right? Okay. What if we didn't like that way? What if I said r is equal to 5, right? Can I square both sides right away? Yes? Then I get r squared equals 25. What's r squared? X squared plus y squared. Just learn that one. Okay? Boom. Awesome sauce. Okay? Now, what can you tell me about this one? Theta equals 3 pi over 4. Polarly, what am I talking about here? What is it? What's the shape? It is not a circle because it's not r equals. Not a triangle, that's not a geometric shape, or a graph. What? What about negative values? So it's a line then, right? Because what it's asking for, it's asking for all the radiuses at an angle of 3 pi over 4. Okay? So that looks like that. That's all the radiuses at 3 pi over 4. Okay? So this is a line through the through the pole with an angle equal to 3 pi over 4. Right? So I need a line to go on top of that. Through what now? Through the origin with a slope of what? What would my slope be? Somebody just whispered it. -1? Right? So what's the equation y equals mx plus b of a line through that with that? Okay. Little side note, the slope of a polar line is equal to the tangent of the angle. Okay? The tangent at 3 pi over 4 is -1. Okay? Thanks for playing along.